I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is a special program. It always is special, but especially today because we've got a good friend, a leader in community, an elder in community co-hosting today. Please help me welcome my friend, Alfred Babington Johnson. Brother Babington, are you there? I'll let you come on camera here. And let's talk about today's program. We've got a lot of wonderful ground to cover. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing nicely, Al, and I was a little concerned of whether or not it was my responsibility to make myself appear on camera, because then we would have been in big trouble.
Well, you know what? The beauty of this is that we're also reaching people in the eyes of their mind's eye, over the power of radio. This is KFAI, and we are communicating via social media in the digisphere over Facebook Live, YouTube, connecting through Twitter and other platforms, not only locally, but nationally through the Facebook page of the Black Press of America, Black Press USA.
Did you
All
say?
in all,
Did you
all
say?
in all, connecting.
Did you say digisphere?
Digisphere, digital sphere. That's right. That's a cool word. Cool word. Well, before we start, Brother Babington, I want to remind our listeners that this is Pledge Week, and Pledge Week means this is a time for you to support this marvelous work, the work we do here at KFAI. And you can do that by simply going to the website, kfai.org, and pledging. Plenty of gifts there. And, show your support. We'll ask you again at the bottom of the program or at the top of the hour. But we thank you for being a listener. We thank you for supporting KFAI. Babington, this is the third in a series of conversations that we've called the Town Hall on MNDot, focusing on the Highway 252 and I-94 project. It's an important project, and it's equally or doubly important because you and I are involved in a way that, in a sense, we haven't been before, and that is partnering with the Department of Transportation to make sure there is awareness, engagement, access, understanding in our community. By our, I mean the African American community, the residents who live in North Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, along the 252 I-94 corridor. But let me start by welcoming you and have you talk about what we're doing together to help promote engagement and awareness.
Well, Al, I attended Howard University, and political science was my major and history was my minor. I've always been intrigued by government, and it's clear to me that government comes to pass because as people collect and there are more and more people, there's a need to regulate things. There's a need to provide services for the broader and broader construct. And in that regard, I thought also, Al, about the fact that a lot of parents are so delighted when a baby is born. The baby is cuddly and cute and just a matter of affection altogether. And then as the child grows, too often it becomes something far beyond what the parents had in mind, and they may be horrified at the end. In some ways, I think that's what happens in government. You have institutions created to serve education or to serve the needs of people for police and safety or for transportation. But whatever it is, the child, the institution becomes as a small thing, a kind of a cute thing, a wonderful thing. But then as it grows, it sometimes becomes something beyond what was imagined. And I think that that's what happens in government. And we end up with something that was designed to serve that ends up becoming what we call a bureaucracy. And I tell you, Al, I had an occasion to look up the definition of bureaucracy in the American Heritage Dictionary. And here's what it said. This is a kind of an interesting take. It says the management or administration marked by diffusion of authority among numerous offices and adherence to inflexible rules of operation. And then a quotation. Knew something of a bureaucracy and those nameless, faceless forces that can crush the life's blood from an individual. Unfortunately, I think that's our sense of a bureaucracy, something that's large and inflexible and difficult to come by. But I'm grateful, and one of the reasons we're in this conversation today is we've been blessed in the state of Minnesota, Al, with the Governor Walls, and in respect to the Department of Transportation with Commissioner Kelleher, because what I have found in engagement with them is they are very determined that the necessity of the large, gargantuan infrastructure must not crush out the life force of the individual. And so it's important that the community be involved with these agencies that are created. And that's what I find, I think, Al, that's how you and I are in this
Mhm.
conversation today with the commissioner. Hats off to Commissioner Kelleher.
Well, before we introduce her, I want to give my listeners, as I always do, some more background, Babington, on your marvelous work, the leadership, the service that you've been uh, presenting to our community locally, nationally for as long as I've known you. You and I go back a long, long, long ways. And I just look back and, just kind of wonder, and appreciate both the passion, the fire, the intent and intensity that we've brought to community. And you're still doing it. We're still doing it. And for that, I'm grateful. But Stair-Step is special in my mind and in my heart. And I want you to give our listeners who might not be familiar with the essence of the Stair-Step initiative concept.
I really appreciate that, Al. And I'm thinking, yes, we have known each other for a long time. And when your afro was higher, taller,
Right.
mine perhaps a little bit as well. The stair step.
And for our listeners on radio, the inside joke is that I'm completely bald. And I don't know if you got some remnants there.
I'm not completely bald.
Okay. All right.
It may look like that from certain angles.
Good haircut.
But in any event, Al, the stair step came to be to take on what I think is the key issue of our time, and that's the breakdown of community. We define community as the way people behave when they believe they belong together. Out of community comes values, and it comes accountabilities, nurture in difficult times, and support going forward in celebration. But that's what community is. But we are living in a time in which we're increasingly insular, siloed, separated, and tribal. And we need to get beyond that for the good of the whole. And that's what Stair-Step is committed to. And that's what you and I have partnered on for these decades.
Well, let me introduce then a person that I consider a friend, a leader, an elder in the community as well, a seasoned, savvy public servant, Margaret Anderson Kelleher. We've worked on boards together, worked in community together, friends with my family, and just a person that I admire and respect. I'm so glad that she's in the role of leadership that she's in at the Department of Transportation, because I know, therefore, the department is in good hands and is headed in a direction that I think will really deliver the outcomes promised by Governor Walz, as you've described, Babington. I think we've got a good team of leadership there. Well, Commissioner, good afternoon. Good to see you. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Well, what a delight. Good afternoon. So good to see you. So good to see Babington and to hear your voices. And I just want to compliment you, Al. In this last year and a half, there have been several times when I've turned to you and your radio program, particularly through Facebook Live, to really understand more about community and about the effects of many different things, including George Floyd and what happened, the murder of George Floyd. And so I just want to thank you for all of that. I had a dog bark for a second. I really apologize for that. So I muted myself for just a second. Hopefully she'll calm down here. Well, I really appreciate that I get to be on with both of you here today and be able to talk a little bit more about what MNDot is doing, what we're doing differently, to talk about what has gone wrong in the past, especially in the area of transportation, and really talk about this very important project of 252 and 94 and how critical it is to get it right and get it more right than we have in the past, for sure. So,
Commissioner, well, let's
mhm,
do this. Let's do MNDot 101 just to set
yeah,
the condition for the conversation. And in responding to that question or that request, if you would talk about the question of community engagement. What's the vision and the role for bringing
yes.
community into the work of the department?
Well, we have a mission at MnDOT to plan and build, operate, maintain a safe, accessible, efficient, and reliable multimodal transportation system. Really, the multimodal piece is that we actually have responsibility for a lot of the roadways you see, not all of them across the state, but we also have responsibility for ports, many of the airports, not the MSP airport, as well as working on transit in rural areas. And it's really to connect people. It's really about connecting people to the people they love, to their family, to work, to all the things that we cherish, the things that Babington was talking about in
Mhm.
community. And, one of the things is we're actually going through an update of this mission right now. And I will just tell you, our internal work and our stakeholder work tells us how important equity is as well.
Mhm. I think we've got a glitch here. Uh, I'm not hearing you right now, Commissioner. Babington, you there?
Yes, I'm there, Commissioner.
Commissioner, I think you're back now. We lost you for a quick second there.
So sorry about that. I think it was the internet,
Uh-huh.
it can be a little bit glitchy. So I will just say again that equity is coming up as we are refining our mission to really be a centerpiece of the work that we're doing for equitable resources and to make sure that people are not burdened with transportation in a way that is an overburden. And we've seen that in the past, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
And so, from your point of view, Commissioner, how important is community engagement? What does it mean to have the community partner with you, or monitor you, or support you, or criticize you? What does community engagement mean for the department?
Well, I think this is a great benefit of having been an elected official at one time
Mhm.
in the city, a state representative representing a portion of the city, and obviously served in other roles as well, like you mentioned, many boards. I think community engagement means that you take the good and the bad. You have to be willing and open to really be able to get the input of the public. And, in the case of MnDOT, there are many cases where federal law actually requires we must do community engagement. But I really hope that people here today and through this project that we're going beyond that, because we want to go beyond the laws and the statutes and those requirements to really engage community in a way that helps us develop our projects so that it can benefit people and that we can have the least amount of burden. I can't say no burden. I mean, transportation is a bit of a burden from time to time on community, but we can mitigate that. I really believe that through the community engagement processes. And so our work here with Stair-Step is so important to that because it really helps us be able to connect to the African and African American community. And the very things you were talking about with Babington, about the very special role that Stair-Step plays in the community. This is why we have, I think, become, in a way, more determined than ever that we have to use methods beyond those typically used by a transportation department.
Babington, jump in. We chop it up in the neighborhood about our successes or sometimes the impediments to what we call engagement. We obviously have been and remain committed to the advancement of our community, of our people. And advancement from our point of view is simply being able to contribute and benefit from our contribution without undue, irrational barriers and distractions. And so we've talked about the question of the highway department. What are your thoughts in this area? How have we experienced bureaucracy, as you led off talking about it in this case?
Yes. Well, there are sometimes things that are done to us in our lives that are done by people who have intention. You know, not everybody is a nice person. There's some villains roaming the earth, and some of the times we're in their crosshairs. There are other times when things happen, and it's a matter of unintended consequences. So that's a challenge as well. So when I hear the commissioner speaking, I have such extraordinary respect and affection for her because she's demonstrated her authenticity down through the years. But this is a large, unwieldy bureaucracy. And so, how do you actually allow the people to engage? Um, uh, and I think, Al, what we've talked about, and we've talked about it with MNDot staff as well, is that people are sometimes intimidated
Mhm.
to enter the process. Often, I had a little story. I don't know if we have time, but Al, at one point, my son, I was taking him around to Junior Olympics, and he was a track guy, and
Mhm.
we were down south, Commissioner, and playing this game where you catch a ball, you throw it back again before you hit the ground, kind of thing. And I did something to my Achilles, and I came away from that limping. And after a while, my wife insisted I go to a doctor. And I went, and the doctor looked at it. And he said, well, there's three possibilities. Either we're going to have to surgically repair your Achilles, or we may graft a piece from another part of your anatomy and place it there. Or he said, and it's like there was a drum roll, and you'll have to wear orthotics the rest of your life. And I thought, oh God, not orthotics. At the time, I didn't know what they were, but this language had me on the ropes. When I later found out what he was talking about was arch support. I said, oh, really? Couldn't you have said that in the first beginning? Well, the deal is, though, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and others often cloak themselves in language that others can't peer through, and it raises their value, but it prevents engagement. So sometimes the system itself, the size of the system, and the expertise of those at the table are things that prevent people initially from being at the table, and then over time you get the inertia of people just, I don't get involved. And they've rationalized that to themselves. But the bad outcome is that the decisions that affect their lives, they're not even involved with. So the commissioner has indicated a commitment to try to find new ways to break through. And we're very happy to be involved in that enterprise.
Babington, you're being very kind and very, very gracious in your description of the challenges. I want to call our attention to institutional failure as well. And I think the thing that's in everybody's mind in our neighborhood is what happened in places like Rondo, what happened in places like North Minneapolis when 994 was created. And from our point of view as residents of Black communities, too often, and you said this, you said it kind of nicely, you called it unintended consequences. I'm not so sure of that. I think sometimes public policy has been pernicious and has failed us. And it's important, though, that we have this conversation. And this conversation is the right thing to do, and it's the right time to have it because we've got so much ahead of us that gives us opportunity to create models, possibilities for engagement that honor our knowledge, our stakeholdership, and allow us to contribute and be served by this entire process. Commissioner, I'm just throwing that out. Let you react to it any way you want to.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So first of all, I should have mentioned at the beginning when Babington said he was a political science major and a history minor. I have the mere degree in college as well, and I think that's important in this conversation because what you just said, Al, is so important. I too, in studying the history of things like I-94 through the Rondo community, 35W through South Minneapolis, I-94 going north to what is now 252 and beyond. You know, there was a history in the highway departments across this country, and my colleagues and I nationally have made recognition of this through a process of passing a resolution through our association to acknowledge that communities were really seen, Black communities, other communities of color, Native American communities, because they were low political power and because they were often low economic power, that they were seen as a easy way to move this interstate highway system through the United States. And of course, it brings benefits, but it also really ravaged community. It took away Black wealth. It took away Native American wealth. It took away Asian American wealth. And we have to acknowledge that Latino wealth. We need to say, this is not a history to be proud of. And we're not going to do it that way again. We're not going to continue to, because someone has a different economic status, because someone is racially different, because they may be different in other ways, we're not going to run this road right through their community. And that's a huge acknowledgement by this, I think, as Babington says, the bureaucracy, but also the industry, because, it is kind of an industry of transportation that supports these things. And so that's one. I'm going to go back to why we're partnering with Stair-Step, because we need to be able to have those authentic relationships and conversations in community, to be able to do better, to be able to make amends. And in the context of really the 252 and 94 environmental impact statement, the study area is really within some of the very most diverse communities in the state, running up I-94 through North Minneapolis, along the river, into Brooklyn Center, which is one of the most diverse communities in our state right now. I just think it's important. And I also want to just also acknowledge this importance of plain language as we go forward. I'm a non-engineer. And coming to MNDot, I have a similar story to the story about your Achilles. I show up at MNDot, and I think it was the very first day. I wasn't even on the job. I went to go meet people, and they hand me this packet, and in the packet is a document that has over 800 acronyms, the MNDot acronyms, the alphabet soup of the world. I thought that other areas maybe had a lot of this. So what I did, because I thought, wow, I'm going to be in these meetings as the commissioner, I need to be able to at least understand what's being said. I took one of those little flashcard programs on my phone, and I put all of those 850 plus acronyms in there, so I could sit in a meeting and they would say, FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. I would type it in as quickly as possible to, not lose a beat. But I think this is, if I needed to do that, imagine what it feels like for the parent who is picking up their kid after school, trying to rush through and get them dinner or whatever. And then we expect them to come to a community meeting like I went to last week on 252-94 up in Brooklyn Park. And so I just share with you, like, I bring that to the job, that it's really important to be thinking about that plain language, to be remembering what it was like when I had two little kids and, struggled to do work and get them fed and make sure they were safe, but also go to a community meeting. I mean, oh my goodness.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, talking with Commissioner Margaret Anderson Kelleher. She's commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Co-hosting today, my friend and colleague, Alfred Babington Johnson. And we're talking about the MNDot project in North Minneapolis, the north suburbs. It's the Highway 252 I-94 project, a big project. And we're talking about it because Brother Babington here has worked through his contacts and leads at the department to figure out how we can bring authentic engagement to support the good work, the necessary work, in a way that honors and supports the understanding of our people, our residents in this community, Black, African American, and African, and other citizens along the corridor. Babington, this thing of language is so important, and I think you've done through creating this leadership group, not creating it, but calling forth the leadership group associated with His Works United and associated with various Stair-Step initiatives, projects, to figure out, are there ways to transmit, to be a fulcrum, if maybe that's the right word for it, to be, as the commissioner had a translator on her computer, translate this technology to ordinary people in community. I'm calling that the Stair-Step model, but I'm going to drop it on you, Babington, to explain, Stair-Step's value here and how we are enabling and supporting our community and supporting the institution at the same time.
Thanks, Al. Commissioner, at some point when we have more time, I have an acronym story to share with you. I was with the Bell system, but another time. But the approach that, having been asked to the table by MNDot and John Thompson and Chris Hoberg and Jerome Adams and April, having been invited to the table, we created a sense of how we were going to go at getting better engagement. And Al, I think about, and perhaps it's appropriate to this transportation discussion, I think about bridges. Can we build bridges that allow communication to occur? And also, can we take create a different construct for how we relate? So instead of thinking about a table that has one side on it and another side on the other side, perhaps the table is round. Maybe we recognize that what we're involved in is something that is to mutual benefit. And the other thing that I like to think about is, now, Commissioner mentioned she's been a lot of things in her life. She's been a legislator, a mother, perhaps even a gardener. I don't know all the things she may do. But the point is, she's a multifaceted person, as we all are. Mm-hmm. And too often, there's a default to being on a side of a table instead of recognizing that everybody's bringing multiple facets to the table. And if we could break through to say we are human beings at this table trying to get together, we might get some other things done. But we have intentionally also, Al, said people do have spheres of influence. So in the African and African American community, there's an extraordinary leverage and power in the voice of the pastor, the preacher. So one of the things in this particular relationship, we reached out to 10 congregations that are strong along the corridor and asked the pastors to either themselves or with a designee be involved in what we call a leadership council, which then meets itself once every 2 weeks, and then meets from time to time with MNDot people to talk about the issues related to this project. We also happily reached out to McFarlane Media, and Al, you're a force of nature in terms of what you've done with Insight News and with minority media in general, and now even in social spaces. So working collaboratively with McFarlane Media as a part of this team we're putting together has been a force multiplier, to say the least. But then the other thing we've done, and I'm excited about, and I think we'll get a chance to wrestle with a little bit even on this show, is we've said, can we look at the situation of this discussion and recognize that people haven't been in the discussion long-term or in effective ways? Can we start to look to create tools that allow people to come to the table with a better sense of what the table means and how they can be effective at it? So we're working together with particularly with Chris Hoberg and John O of SRF and UAL. We have tried to craft the beginnings of something We call it a tool. And the goal of the tool is to allow people in a non-threatening way to have an opportunity to see the pieces of the puzzle and understand perhaps how they come together and have a non-threatening discussion that perhaps creates more musculature for the real world discussions to come.
So let me ask you to introduce our friend Chris Hoberg. I've had just a lot of fun listening to Chris. You know, Commissioner, you're talking about the engineers. Well, here comes the engineer, right?
It's engineer.
And but I just have mad respect for this engineer in particular, but the profession as well. I'll say this: my son-in-law is an engineer, and they just have a method for looking at the world that just makes all the sense in the world. So, Chris, again, hats off to you and your team, and the earnestness, the seriousness, and the methodical nature of how you approach everything. It's amazing. So thank you for being in this program. Thank you for guiding this relationship between the Stair-Step Foundation, McFarlane Media, and MNDot. Babington, talk about this idea more and bring Chris into it, if you would, on how do we create ways for our ordinary people, ordinary citizens to understand, to plug in, to reflect, to demonstrate what equity means by our action, by our involvement, by the invitation to us to be involved, and by the ease with which we can both understand and offer ideas.
Yes, and let me just, before I say this, let me say also on the call now or shortly, we have a couple of members of our leadership team, Reverend Sarita Oduniyi, I like to say her name, and and we have Pastor Ezra Faget, and I think we also have a couple of other people on from MNDot, Chris, right?
Yep. We've got some members of our leadership team here as well, Jerome Adams and April Crockett.
Okay, so the thing is, and Chris, maybe you can articulate what we're trying to achieve. We've been talking intently, and I tell you, as Al said, it's been great. The conversations we've had 2 or 3 times a week with Chris and often with Jerome and April have been real world conversations, you know, real transparency, real authenticity. But Chris, you want to characterize what we're trying to achieve with the tool?
Yeah, I guess you know at the end of the day, part of the relationship with Stair-Step for me has been one of an advisory role as well, and I think you kind of keyed me into a need that we had in terms of our engagement, and that's kind of what you've articulated to this point, is that sometimes, you know, the language that we as engineers use, or you know, the technical nature of the subject material can act as a barrier. So how can we create a tool that helps ease that point of entry for folks, and kind of gives them a lay of the land as they step into the project on a larger scale, so that they can kind of understand where we're at and bring it into the realm of that kind of plain language.
Yeah, and so the thing is, and Commissioner and Superintendent Faget and Reverend Oduniyi, as we share the basic notion that we're putting forward, want to invite you all to listen in and recognize, Chris said, where we are trying to go. We're trying to create this mechanism that allows people a way into the dialogue, a way to perhaps understand the processes involved, and then be able at the end of it to engage. And one other thing, and that Superintendent Faget and Reverend Oduniyi are part of our leadership council, and our intention is for this tool to be their tool, for us to have this, and then for them to be able, in smaller circles, to share this tool as a means of starting conversation and engaging people in conversation. So, Chris, you know, working with you has been really rewarding as we're trying to create this. And one of the theories we said is that there's the intimidation of interaction because the experts have their own vocabulary and what have you. So we talked about empowering the community by creating this non-threatening exercise. Okay, shall I just go for it, Chris? Or no, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just say, again, it's trying to increase access and increase people's ability to engage and participate by taking out some of that mystery, right? And I really think it kind of boils down to, or the goal here is to walk through kind of an example problem in a transportation realm, maybe in a familiar world, and to kind of step through 4 basic steps of problem solving. Really identifying the problem first and foremost. What are you looking to solve? Figure out what different possible solutions there are that might improve those problems that you're trying to solve. Figure out how well each of those solutions performs, and then figure out what the impacts of each of them are, and then you set them next to each other and you can see them, and the cream tends to rise to the top, and the milk sometimes tends to fall away. So that's kind of the basic process, I would say.
Okay, so I'll have at it. And first, let me introduce you to our cast of characters, and a brief update on their lives. We find ourselves in the land of Oz, years after Dorothy and Toto have gone home to Kansas. The roadway system faces new challenges. The Oz Department of Transportation is conducting a review of the situation. Interestingly, some of the original Yellow Brick Road warriors are still very involved in the transportation issues in the land of Oz. Here's a brief update on their lives. The Scarecrow operates a very fertile farming enterprise from which he provides 70% of the corn for the county. Feed trucks are often seen going and coming from his farm, situated on a yellow brick road. If situations call for any expansion of the yellow brick road, the Scarecrow may have some of his cornfield taken. Our buddy, the thin tin man, runs a thriving tin shop and is the largest employer in the valley. He and his employees drive automobiles on the roads of Oz, going to and from work. The Tin Man shop is close to the place where the yellow and green brick roads cross one another. Improvements made to the intersection could benefit the Tin Man and his shop. The Lion, formerly known as Cowardly, is semi-retired. He takes the bus to his part-time job in the forest in the county. He has a concern that any changes to the road not disrupt the wildlife that make the forest such a wonderful place to visit. And then there are other residents living, as we say, along the corridor, many of whom live in the Emerald City and use the road to get to and from work, church, and other destinations. So that's our cast. Here's the situation. Every day, the Tin Man commutes to his shop using the yellow brick road. Traffic is heavy because people come from far and near to get things fixed. The shop is located close to the yellow brick road and has entry points along the green brick road. At the point where the yellow and green brick roads meet, cars stack up because so many people are trying to turn left onto the green brick road to get to the tin shop. In fact, the line to turn left gets so long that sometimes it blocks other lanes of traffic on the yellow brick road. This causes uncomfortable delays for both the tin shop visitors and other people using the yellow brick road to go to other places. Other residents of Oz use the yellow brick road to get to the Emerald City. There are bikers, including the Scarecrow who bikes to his cornfield. There are transit users like the Lion who takes the bus to the forest. The Scarecrow finds crossing Yellow Brick Road very dangerous because of all the cars lining up at the intersection. He wants to visit his cornfield, but the crossing makes it a dangerous matter. Our friend the Lion takes the bus to the forest, but the Lion's bus is often held up by the lineup of cars at the intersection. Too many times he's late for work and late on his way home to his family. Chris, could you put on your special transit analysis hat and talk us through this question? How can this issue of the yellow brick road be dealt with to address the needs of the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the other residents of the land of Oz?
Sure. I think, again, the illustration here using the four basic steps of problem solving here, we're really trying to first and foremost identify what the problem is or what the problems are, right? So within the story, we can start to see some of that come out, right? You've got the yellow brick road, and we're seeing delays on that road, either for people trying to get into the Tin Man shop or folks on the bus or people trying to get to the Emerald City. So it's kind of a congestion issue, right? And those characteristics that come out in the story help you to identify kind of what the roots of those problems are. So we know we have a congestion problem there, but we also know, the Scarecrow wants to ride his bike across and get to his field, right? And it's a dubious crossing for him. So that's a problem for people trying to cross the road as well, right? So that's two kind of problems we've identified there. First and foremost is what it is what we're looking to solve in this particular example, right? So once we've identified those two things, now we can move into, well, how might we fix those things, right? As an example, those left turning vehicles, they're stacking up and they're backing up onto the through lanes, and the buses and the cars can't get through to the Emerald City. So how do we address that stacking of vehicles in the left-hand turn lane? Well, maybe we can lengthen those turn lanes and provide more space for those cars turning left and get them out of the through lane to allow the traffic to get through. That's one alternative, one potential solution there. Maybe a different intersection type would fix it. And maybe we should build a bridge across and have ramps down to the yellow brick road and take those turning vehicles off those lanes altogether, right? Those are three basic options, or three things that we could look at as a way to fix these problems. And again, that next step, once we've identified a bevy of solutions or a range of potential options, how well do they actually solve the problems? In the case of extending turn lanes, that sounds like it probably fixes those cars backing up onto the main line and the congestion. But what does it do for the Scarecrow on the bike and people trying to cross the yellow brick road? Maybe that's a solution to one problem, but not others. That's just an example of trying to figure out how well you're solving the problem, right? And then the final step, of course, is understanding what those impacts of each one of those opportunities are, or each one of those potential solutions, to understand, okay, with the Scarecrow's fields and the Tin Man shop and the Lion's Forest, all of those are kind of sensitive resources or things of import, and we need to understand for each of the potential solutions, what are the impacts to those? Because if we don't understand that, and we don't understand how well it solves the problem, well, we're not gonna make a well-rounded and well-informed decision. So that's really, I think, kind of those four basic steps: identify that problem, figure out potential ways to solve it, understand how well they fix it, and understand what their impacts are. You bring those together, and you have a framework there to come up with a proper solution.
So, Chris, can I ask Reverend Faget? You had a question into this. Is he still on?
AZ, you can bring him on if he's there.
Yeah, we need Faget and Oduni, everybody else on if we can.
Okay, yeah, bring everybody back in, AZ.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hello to everyone. Yeah, listen to Chris, the steps in identifying the problem and offering a solution. My concern is dealing with people. When you offer a solution, there are always trade-offs. How do you decide who gets to win? Because to each person, their own personal, unique situation is more important than anyone's else.
Yeah, and it's a great question. I'd say hopefully, first and foremost, we come up with a project that benefits everybody, and solves the problems that we've identified. I think when it comes to those impacts, first and foremost, we want to avoid them if we can. We want to minimize them and mitigate them after that. But understanding those trade-offs is really part of this process, right? And once the impacts of a potential solution start to come into focus, We look at it through our evaluation criteria. It's just a series of different metrics that we identify to help us measure performance and impact. And you start to see which criteria differentiate each other amongst those solutions. So it's something that you kind of have to step through the process to see how that manifests itself and how that decision gets made. It's not something that I can really articulate in the here and now and say, well, this is how we figure out, again, kind of who wins and who loses. It's more about understanding what those impacts are, what their magnitudes are the resources sensitive, are they not, can we avoid those impacts, can we minimize them, can we mitigate them, that all kind of comes into the decision making and helps us understand what the best performing solution is and how we can address the impacts that come along with it.
So before some of this we can circle around on, but Reverend Naduni, what was your thought?
Yes. Are you all able to hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm kind of building on superintendent's question. What are the ways MNDot can make sure the voice of other community members that are not shop owners um, is it's heard in this process?
So I think some of this goes back to the commissioner's points on public engagement and the importance of it. I think speaking for the project team, I think we're constantly looking for ways to connect with people on this project. Whether that's at public meetings, we've had a series of both virtual and an in-person one over the last couple of weeks, where we hope people have the ability to join us for those and can engage. We try and do what we call pop-up meetings, where we have a little booth or a stand somewhere where people are going to be, if that's a farmer's market or a community festival, or even a Saturday at the grocery store. Anywhere where we can meet people during their day and just kind of plug the project and say, hey, this is something that's happening, and here's where you can find more information, and this is how you can get involved. Even to the point of being on the radio show here today, I think this is really about elevating the project and making sure that people understand that we're looking at the problems that exist and we're looking at ways that we can improve it. I'm going to take that opportunity real quick here and plug our website. Do a quick Google search for MNDot 252 and you should be able to find our website. We've got right now an online open house. It's right at the top of the webpage, so I'd like to encourage everybody to take a look there. But to answer your question, Reverend Oduni, we're always looking for new ways, and this is an example of that. Hopefully, you've seen our folks out at pop-ups, or you've heard about the open houses, and you've had a chance to take a look at that information on the website. But it all kind of comes back to the point of how do we give folks the opportunity to plug themselves in the capacity that they can plug themselves in.
You had something else, Cynthia? Sharita?
Yes, sir. Another thing that I would like to ask, and if it's not happening, to suggest, is one way we know folks in families in particular, get really excited about something is when their children are excited about something. That's how the children's movement, the civil rights movement got popped off, is because the young people were really like, I'm all in. So, is MNDot at all in conversation with any youth-led organizations? And if not, is that something that you would be interested in doing to get the young people involved, especially the high schoolers who are now using public transportation to get to school? This will affect them as well. So just kind of wondering what would that look like?
Yeah, I'd say. Oh, go ahead,
Chris?
Commissioner.
So if I could build on that, I think that's absolutely, we want to be engaging young people. When I was at this open house up in Brooklyn Park last week, there were like 5 young kids, and I was thinking, when we do these projects, yeah, we're all important, okay, but we're really doing the projects because of those kids, because they're going to have to live with both the consequences of the decisions that are made, and they're also potentially going to get the benefit of the decisions made. And so I think ways to connect to, groups that that you have connections to. I think about Juxtaposition Arts. I think about other groups in North Minneapolis, but also in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, to be able to really engage those ideas. And I think even if those ideas, with young kids, the ideas can be kind of a story, right? But out of those stories come the ways that kids imagine traveling in the future. And I think we do have to take that into account. So I just want to build on that. That's absolutely right. And I also want to say that, Chris didn't mention, but, even coming to after Sunday services or another event that you have where families are together and they can engage in the feedback. I think that is really important to us. And, we would only come to those places as invited because they are special places in the community.
What a rich conversation. I'm loving this. This is a great program. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're calling this the third in a series of town hall meetings on the Highway 252 I-94 project presented by, being executed by Minnesota Department of Transportation, MNDot. And we're here around the leadership and work of the Stair-Step initiative. My guest co-host today, Alfred Babington Johnson, the leader of the Stair-Step initiative. And you've been listening to the commissioner for MNDot, Margaret Anderson Kelleher, also one of the MNDot engineers, Chris Hoberg. And Babington, that story you told, I think was right on the money. The story of putting the Oz framework around a scenario that lets us look at the choices, the decisions, the competing interests and strategies for engaging people. And I want to thank Pastor Forget and Reverend Oduniyi for your Oduniyi for your excellent questions. This has been really, really cool. Let me throw it back to you, Babington. Just this is so cool. Where do we go from here?
Well, we want to do more, and I know we're running out of time. But Al, I'd like to hear Jerome, just his sense of things. He's a very gifted, sensitive, perceptive one.
Jerome, good to see you. Jerome is the, I think, senior engineer, right? Project manager for
Yes.
The western area of the Twin Cities region, and a guiding light in this work as well. You've been on the program before. Always a pleasure to have you here, Jerome. Please jump in, weigh in.
Thank you very much. Reverend Babington, Al McFarlane, how are you doing?
Great.
Good. Yeah, I'm the project manager, and we did a really good discussion here. I like the Yellow Brick Road example. We do have a 252-94 project, and there are real problems on the project. There are crashes. It's difficult for people to cross 252 on bike or on foot, and we need to improve transit. And this project is in the cities of North Minneapolis, Brooklyn Center, and Brooklyn Park. And we need to make sure that we build a project that works for all three cities. And yes, one of the conundrums in life is there could be negative impacts. And so this process to look at the alternatives will take the next 3 years. We would like you to join us. We will carefully look at the benefits and impacts of those alternatives. And yes, we want your help to figure out how to reach people that historically government and MNDOT somehow keeps missing. We spend money on public engagement, and yet we still keep missing people. And I'm really happy about this partnership and that we are able to reach more people. Thank you.
Babington, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just, thank you, Commissioner, for who you are. As I said earlier, you and the governor set a great tone. I hope we can continue to go forward. Been delighted by our engagement with the MNDOT staff, Chris, solid as a rock, April and Jerome, good people, and the leadership group. And I think, Commissioner, a couple of things we want to really drive forward to, and 2 words I want to use in respect to our community every time, are capacity building and empowerment. And if we intentionally are looking to accomplish those things, I think at the end of the day, we have more people involved because people take ownership, because they see it as theirs, you know. And so this has been a great opportunity. Thanks again to the MNDot staff for a certain amount of adventure that they entered in with when we have been talking about the yellow brick road and what have you. You've got a great staff of very tenacious, hardworking folk who want to make sure it's done right. And Al, before you sign out, I really want to try to, if the commissioner has something, but then to let Chris have a last word.
Sure, sure. Well, I wanted to just have the commissioner sort of reflect on her note in the chat where she said she loved the example. And, you know, what chord was it striking with you, Commissioner? And how do we use storytelling? I think you've addressed a little bit. What things do you believe we can do together to engage people, to capture their imagination and their commitment to help and contribute to making our community what it can be and should be?
Well, I thought the example was brilliant. And why it was brilliant is because it's an example that most people are familiar with in some way. But yet, to put it in the context of this project or of a project on the roadway and the competing interests, it reminds me of two things. One, we are storytellers as human beings. That is, story is so important to us. And you all do that. That's part of the process here. And so we need to really engage even more in that storytelling of people's lives. The second part I thought about was I do have this expertise, I guess, in negotiation. And it made me think of the story of the orange, when the little kids are fighting over the orange. And, you know, why are they fighting over the orange? They both need the orange. Well, one needs the orange because they need the orange zest to put it in the muffins that they're making for their grandma. And the other one wants the orange for the snack that they need because they're hungry. And you know, we won't be able to make every situation figured out to figure out the win-win, but I do think there's more possibilities when we hear people's stories and know what their needs are. And so I just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come forward and talk about this very important process.
Chris, why don't you finish up by inviting people to, again, connect? How can people either come to an event or at least learn about the ongoing opportunities at the department?
Yep, absolutely. Best thing to do, I'd say right now is again, you can do a quick Google search for the MNDot 252, and it should be the first link you see. Otherwise, you know, I guess we could put a hyperlink in the chat here. Maybe Al, you can share that with your audience. But there's a place there on the website where you can provide comment. You can sign up for email updates. That's a great way to be plugged into any new events that are coming up as we go along. But stay tuned and come along with us.
Great, great. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. What a wonderful show today. Delivering, I think, as we always promised, a robust conversation about our community. Special thanks to Commissioner and your team at MNDot, to Brother Babington and the team in the Leadership Council. Thanks to the station KFAI. I'm going to turn it over now back to the studio, because between now and the top of the hour, we want to have a pledge reminder. This is Pledge Week. We need you to support the station by contributing. So Mason, if you're there, I'm going to hand it over to you. And again, thanks everybody for being here today. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Very good. Thanks, Al.